Okay, so in the second part of this introductory lesson, we would have had a look at the first sheet that I would have handed out in class. And it looks like this. All right, so let's just try and make it, there we go, a little bit bigger. Okay, so it's trying to get you back into the terminology that we use. So from those questions, you would have seen that there are cells, and cells with similar, a group of similar cells with the same structure and function would form a tissue. And then different tissues would group together to form an organ, like the connective tissue around a muscle, like the actual muscle, and then the blood vessels inside the muscle. And then organs work together to form a system or an organ system. So, for example, think of the digestive system: stomach, intestines, rectum, pancreas, liver, esophagus, etc. And then all the different systems like the digestive, respiratory, circulatory, muscular, nervous, etc. systems would make up the organism. Okay, so what other systems can you think of? So that's what we've been doing since the beginning of the year. In the first term, we talked about biological molecules, all right? But we know that molecules are made up of atoms. So, for example, we looked at the structure of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. And we saw that most of, they all had a carbon backbone, so the atoms that form the backbone are carbon atoms, and then hydrogens and oxygens join to all of them. And, proteins have got nitrogen and other, atoms like sulfur, etc. And then we learned about organelles. So some organelles, like the chloroplast, are surrounded by a membrane, and membranes are made up of phospholipids with proteins and cholesterol and sugars, etc. And then all the organelles suspended in the cytoplasm of a cell. So these are the levels of organization from simple to most complex. Cells of the same type group together to form a tissue. Different tissues work together to make an organ. All right? Think of the brain. There would be the white matter. Well, we do that in grade 11. White matter, gray matter, the fluid in the brain, the membranes around the brain, which are called meninges, and so on. There's lots of different tissues making up the brain, an organ. And then the organ system would be the nervous system, made up of the nerves and the brain, which work together. And then all the different systems make up an organism. And we need to relate that to a plant as well, which you basically did by answering those simple questions. So now we look at, what kind of tissues you will find in a plant by giving them their proper names. All right, so I will show you when we get back to class, when I have my models with me, that we've got different types of tissues. Okay, so meristematic, you've come across that word before. If you remember, we talked about it when we talked about mitosis. Where does mitosis occur in plants? And we said in the buds at the tip of the stem, the buds on the side, the lateral buds, at the tip of the root to make the root grow longer, and that pericycle, that cylinder of meristematic tissue, which enables roots to make branch roots. So those are cells capable of cell division. Right? So meristematic means very small cells that are dividing. Okay, then they're going to form all the tissues of the plant. So little cells will differentiate and become the actual permanent, the tissues that make up the plant that you would have seen sitting in front of you, or the photograph that I showed you. So permanent, they are the mature cells, and they don't divide again. They're now forming the actual tissues of the plant. So simple tissues and complex tissues, all right? Now, simple tissues basically mean that they are composed of one type of cell. Complex tissues are composed of more than one type of cell. So, if you were a plant, just like us, we need something, a covering tissue. So maybe you called some of those tissues covering tissues. Now, we've got epidermis and dermis. If you remember, the dermis is where new cells are made to replace the epidermal cells which are lost. All right? So epidermis also covers a plant. It's a layer of cells which covers the plant. But now you've just got this protective layer. What are you going to put on the inside? You need to pack the plant. You need to fill it up with cells so that it can absorb water and photosynthesize and transport things around, etc. So that is known as parenchyma or parenchyma, potato, potato. Okay, so I say parenchyma because that is the pronunciation that we use when I studied botany, when I did my degree many years ago. Right, so parenchyma for packing tissue. It's going to fill up the roots and the stems and the leaves. And then you've got you've got protective tissue and you've got this packing tissue. But hang on, it's a floppy plant. So how are you going to make it stand up straight? You need some kind of strengthening tissue. So these two words are hard sounding words. Parenchyma, sclerenchyma. All right, so they are going to be the supportive tissues. The cell walls are going to be harder, making the cells more capable of strengthening the plant, making it, being able to grow up and produce flowers, etc. And some plants even become trees. All right, now there's another word at the bottom here. Okay, so parenchyma is the tissue that fills up the plant. It's going to be in the roots, and in green stems, and in leaves, and in flowers, and in fruit. But if it contains chloroplasts, we call it chlorenchyma. All right, so would there be chlorenchyma in the roots? No, there's no chloroplast, but definitely in green stems, on the outside of the stems, not in the middle. Sunlight can't get there. And in the leaves, okay? And even the strengthening tissue called chlorenchyma, it's usually found on the edge of a stem, like a celery stem, and we'll have a look at all of these. If it contains chlorophyll or chloroplast, with chlorophyll, the pigment inside the chloroplast, then we call it chlorenchyma as well, because it helps the plant to photosynthesize. All right, so we've got the covering tissue, we've got the tissue filling up, making, if you eat a carrot or a fruit, or if you feel some leaves and they're very soft, okay, that would be parenchyma. Chlorenchyma would be the strengthening tissue, and sclerenchyma. All right, so those are simple tissues made up of, simple tissues composed of one type of cell. Then you get the complex tissues composed up of more than one type of cell. Sorry, I've got something in my eye. Okay, so we look at the basic plant tissues. Now, complex tissues would be xylem and phloem. Xylem is the water conducting tissue, all right? Phloem is the food, the sugar conducting tissue. And xylem, it consists of long tubular-like cells, which allows water and mineral salts to pass through. Now, there's actually 4 different types of cells. We read here again, complex tissues when there's more than one type of cell. But I've only given you 2. Well, in this diagram, they've only shown 2 to make it simpler. Okay, so there are cells called Xylem Vessels and Xylem tracheae, and they are slightly different. They're either very fat or very thin, and they're tubular to allow the transport of water-containing salts from the roots up the stems into the leaves. Okay, then you also need a food-conducting tissue, so that is called phloem. And if you think about it, the leaf will photosynthesize and it will make glucose, and then that can be stored as sucrose. Think of a sugarcane plant. So sucrose is what's going to be transported from the leaves down to the rest of the plant, and the plant can break it down into glucose and then break the glucose down further to produce energy for the cells to grow and do what they need to do. All right, now those 2 cell types that make up phloem, is actually more, but I'm only giving you the 2 main ones. They're known as sieve tubes and companion cells. So we're going to figure out what all of these look like. And all we need to do is start by thinking, what is a plant cell made of? There's cellulose, there's a cell membrane, there's cytoplasm, there's going to be organelles, all right? ER, Golgi body, nucleus, etc. But chloroplasts will only be found in certain plant cells, not in the roots, but definitely in the outside of green stems and green apples, and then later on they become they become chromoplasts, like a red apple. Okay, so plant cells can change. So meristematic cells, right at the top here, tiny little cells, can differentiate and become all these different tissues which make up the permanent structure of the plant. And we're going to go through them one by one, and it's like a story, okay, starting with Lego and adding more bits and changing each tissue and seeing how it differs to make up the different parts of the plant. Now at the bottom here, from my little questions earlier on, I said, so what organs would a plant have? Leaves, roots, stem, flowers, and fruit. And the systems, root, shoot or stem, and leaf system. It's a little bit different to us, as I explained in the previous video. All right, so this is to just give you an idea, an overall view of what type of tissue the plant has. And we will be going through a simple table, once again, structure, what does it have? Therefore, function, what does it do? And showing you lots of models and things to build up the story of what plant tissues look like. And it's not difficult, okay? We're just going to keep changing slightly what will the different tissues look like to do the job that they need. All right, so please don't be scared of what's in it. It's actually not very difficult.